Did you see this? Paris is going to build 650 kilometers of bikeways after lockdown. We can do the exact same thing in Denver. And we can do it in less than a month. It doesn't have to take 18 years like the city's current plan says it's going to take. Denver versus Paris. As Napoleon said, Paris is good, but Denver is magnificent. Let's stick it to Paris. And here's how we can do it. First, a little background. You might have heard that there's an experiment going on right now called shared streets. There are a handful of locations around town where streets are shut down to through traffic and bikes and walkers are prioritized. It's a huge success. There are families out riding bikes. Indeed, tens of thousands of people are walking and biking using these open streets. And critically, there's been essentially no pushback from neighbors who live along these streets. And it's not hard to imagine why that's the case when you see that through traffic is discouraged on folks' streets, and they're still able to park and drive to their houses when they need to. And it just so happens that this is a perfect experiment for the Bike Streets Project. It asks the fundamental question: what happens when you take a subset of streets, discourage through traffic, and encourage biking and walking? So, the extenuating circumstances have prompted us to run an experiment, and it worked. The question now is, will we learn from it? Or are we going to go back to the status quo and the old way of doing things? Hopefully, we'll build on what we've learned. And what we've learned is that this experiment has created a template, and using this template is how we beat Paris. And we can do this in an incredibly short amount of time for very, very little money. And here's how. Step 1 is to use the community-created Bike Streets map, which is over 400 miles of quiet neighborhood streets. Step 2 is to use the actual designs that were created in the Shared Streets experiment. Things like simple road closed signs that are super inexpensive. Step 3, as with the Shared Streets experiment, make signs and zip tie them to poles. Step 4, where there are gaps in the Bike Streets map, designate shared use sidewalks. So for a tricky intersection like this that appears on the Bike Streets map as a walk section, just allow it to be a shared use sidewalk. There's already a precedent for that. Just like that, we'll have 400 miles of quiet neighborhood streets, where through traffic is discouraged and neighbors, bikes, and walkers are prioritized. How you like me now, Paris? Now you might be thinking that temporary signs and sandbags are ugly. So here's how to make it permanent using a series of low-cost upgrades installed over 2 years. In the first year, you focus on simple things like paint on the street, more permanent diverters to prevent cars from cutting through neighborhoods, and you add signs to light up the routes. In the second year, you focus on some of the intersections, things like four-way stops, neighborhood traffic circles, pedestrian crossings, these nifty flashing things called RRFBs, and to straighten out some of the wiggly sections, hawk signals on bigger arterial street crossings. And that's what it would take to beat Paris and be one of the best bike cities in the entire world. We all have a role to play in creating the city that we want. So here's what you can do right now. Contact City Council, the Mayor, the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, and tell them that you want Denver to be the best bike city in the world. Not in 18 years, now.